Welcome to Herald Global, Mr. Pattanaik.
Hi.
So my first question to you, what got you the interest in mythology to start off with?
So it's been part of my life for the now 20 years, so I can't remember now.
Okay.
But I was interested in Amar Chitra Katha and Chandamama like most children.
Sure.
But I wanted to know a little deeper. And I started reading academic books. And it was just a casual thing. It began as just a hobby and now it's my passion and profession.
Okay. So can you please tell us about your journey?
So I I studied medicine and mythology was part of my life at that time, but I was not conscious of it.
Sure.
Then after medicine, I joined the pharma industry. And at that time, my interest became more serious, but it was only on weekends.
Sure.
So I would earn my money through pharmaceutical industry. For 15 years, that's what I did. And I would, on my free time, focus on mythology. And that's when I started writing articles on mythology in some journals and started publishing some work. And then, I even published my book in 1996 when I was still working in the pharma industry. Then over time, I realized that things that I was learning in the mythological world were helping me become a better manager in the pharma world.
Sure.
So that's when people would enjoy my conversations. I would explain problems and solutions using Ramayana and Mahabharata, which became very popular in my friend circles. And I started writing on that. That created a lot of buzz in the market. And that's around 2008 when somebody said, who read one of my articles and he met me and he spoke to me and he said, why don't you do this full time? So that shift happened in 2008 and I started doing mythology full time. And now that's what I do. So I write on mythology, which is pure mythology, and applied mythology. So these two worlds that I do in the last 10 years.
Okay. So what was your ideology when you decided to talk about, mythology? Okay, the relevance of it primarily.
Yeah. So you see, when we talk about religion, people usually talk about high philosophy. But common people are interested in stories and they learn through storytelling.
Sure.
And I realized in India, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and everybody would tell me there's a lot of knowledge in Ramayana and Mahabharata. And I said, tell me what is the knowledge? So, what am I learning? And nobody would answer that question. They would only say, nahi, bahut gyan hai. Like, they would not very specifically tell me, okay, this is what you can learn, economics or politics, is it art, is it culture, is it science? What do you learn in? And nobody would give me a clear answers. So I think that is what drove me to start asking fundamental questions. And then I started realizing how Indian stories are different from European stories, from Middle Eastern stories, from Greek stories, from Chinese stories. And I realized that that's what makes us different, that every culture has a different storytelling format. Okay. And that shapes the way they look at life and the world. And nobody's really paying attention to this. They would, some academicians here and there, but not really at the level that it needs to be done.
Okay. So once you mentioned, a society cannot exist without myth.
Yes.
So can you please explain? What do you mean by that?
See, human beings and animals are very different. Animals will eat food and they hunt for food, they reproduce. We also are interested in food and reproduction, but more than that, we seek meaning. We want to make sense of our lives. Why are we alive? What is the purpose of the world? Every tribal community asks that. You go to Amazon jungle, you go to Africa, you go to Congo, you go to Australia, you talk to the Aborigines. They all will say, this is how the world began, this is the way the world is going to end, this is what is going to happen to me after death. Which means we are looking for meaning. We get meaning through stories. That's myth. So you cannot find a culture. So if you go to an archaeologist, when does he know that this is not the remains of an animal and this is the remains of a human society?
Sure.
So the first sign is that he will find fire. So fire has been domesticated. He sees tools, but he will still call them, he's not very sure when does culture begin. And he'll say culture begins when he finds burial sites, which means after death, you think like your body has value and therefore you'll bury your body in a particular way, or cremation mounds. Animals don't do that. That is the moment archaeology begins. So archaeology will say now culture has started.
To talk about, you just spoke about Rama and Mahabharata. So what is the learning that we can take and which is relevant in modern times today?
I think both Ramayana and Mahabharata are stories which tell us that, we are all bound by our own restrictions. So in Ramayana, Ram may be God, but he is restricted by his royal role. In Mahabharata also, Krishna is told to be God, but he is restricted by his role as a charioteer. We don't have absolute power. Even God doesn't have absolute power. I think that's the biggest learning you get. And nobody can control the world or change the world. So Ram is bound by rules and regulations and politics, and he can't really change. He works within the system. You can't change the system. And even Krishna works within the system. He struggles within the system. So that's, I think, the biggest learning that we get. You can't, there is no concept of an all-powerful God who burns cities, which you find in the Bible, for example. We'll get angry and, Sodom and Gomorrah is burnt and Noah's Ark flood happens. You don't find these stories in Ramayana and Mahabharata. Nobody, even if there's a story of flood, it is not God creating a flood or God saying, I'll punish you, or a prophet saying that if you don't follow God's way, you'll be punished. These ideas don't exist in Indian thought. They're alien.
I wanted to ask you, we constantly hear about the term Hindutva right now, okay, and in different shapes and form from different places,
Yes.
and with different perspectives. So what is the true description of Hindutva according to you?
It starts somewhere in the early 19th century, but it is consolidated itself with Savarkar in the 1920s.
Yes.
So it's a 100-year-old idea. It's not like a 1,000-year-old idea. And basically, its fundamental idea is that Hinduism is under threat and you have to protect it from itself and from foreigners. So they're basically in a war zone. So if you talk to them, they're constantly under attack. And that's what Hindutva is about. So if you see people with a paranoid way of thinking that
Yes.
Hinduism khatre mein hai, and if you tell them anything, then they will lash out at you, then that's Hindutva. It's nothing to do with Atmagyan, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. It's nothing to do with governance. It's only that we are under threat and somebody is going to attack us, we better kill them before they kill us. So that's the simplest way of understanding Hinduism. They're constantly under threat. So they're not interested in philosophy, mythology, poetry, culture, art. They don't even know what they're protecting. So that's what you see around. And that's a very powerful thing because people want, war makes heroes. Without war, there's no heroes. So if you want to be heroic, then you want a war. And when you want a war, then you imagine enemies and you start fighting them. And I'm sure there is a threat out there to people, but everything in the world has threat. There's nothing in the world which doesn't have a threat. All life forms there is, but a kind of a paranoid sense of siege that we are under threat. So that's why they'll talk less about India and more about Pakistan, less about Vedas and more about Congress. So then you start realizing that they're not interested in Rig Veda, they're not interested in scriptures. And if they talk about scriptures, it's only to show superiority. And it's not to understand, it's not to explore, not to make your life better. It is only to say, I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you. And so that's what Hindutva is about. It's not about, it's not smart.
True. So as a society, why are we failing to respect others' belief according to you?
Well, that's human beings. All good human beings respect other people's belief. And those who don't respect other people's belief are just savages. And that's simple as that. I mean, why should we behave like savages? A good human being understands different kinds of culture, and you work and you try to, and not feel threatened. See, animals are not interested in other animals. Humans are interested in other humans. And we try to work together with them and figure out ways of engaging with them. And I think that's what we should aspire for.
Once you mentioned Saraswati should be out of the closet. So how we can provide education or knowledge?
In the old caste-based society, caste will not let knowledge be shared. So every caste would lock its knowledge. They will only pass it on to their sons and their daughters, and they would only marry people within the community, which basically is a kind of you don't let knowledge move from one community to the other. The weaver will not teach others, non-weavers, weaving. Sure. The potter will not teach the non-potter. And the Brahmins will not teach their knowledge to others. So that's sort of boundaries. But I think now we live in a very different world order where these boundaries we don't care about or we don't value. And we have to move to a place where we share knowledge, exchange knowledge, and that's what I'm talking about.
If I ask you one character from mythology which inspires you, okay, which you think is it's relevant in today's time also, and it is good to look forward to, the way he is projected. So who that would be?
So it's not really a mythological character, it's a legendary character, and it's not a he, it's a she. It's Ubhaya Bharati. She is the wife of Mandan Mishra, who looks at Adi Shankaracharya and tells him, do you have knowledge of Kama Shastra? Because she sort of challenges this man who thinks he knows everything and says, but you've never had any sexual relations, so your understanding of human relationships is very poor, and inspires Shankaracharya to go into Tantra. So I think nowadays we are controlled by a lot of men who know nothing about relationships. I think they need a little tantric understanding from tantric gurus. So I think that is the best thing to do.
So thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.